One moment, one moment. We're getting set up. One moment. Okay, so if you're watching this after the fact, which I assume is probably the majority of people, skip a few minutes ahead because if you've seen the other live streams, it takes me a few minutes to set up to make sure the audio, the video is working. And if you're watching it later, I don't want to subject you to that. So probably like 3 minutes ahead of time. And I'll see you there. The topic for today is Bejeweled, but I'm going to explain to the live people in a moment. Okay, so as per usual, if you are the viewer, there is one of you. There's literally one concurrent viewer. Can I show that? One viewer right there. If it is you, and if you're the one watching, it is you, you have a responsibility to tell me in the chat if you can hear me and if you can see me and if everything is nice and synced up, because I will not start until then. So if you just comment hello, it's not useful, okay? I know you want to be useful. Okay. The whole gang's here. Hello, 4K Productions. I recognize you from the beginning of time. Let's get started. We already got 17 of you in here. So here's the situation. We are on day 8 of Nodevember. As you know, I like to stay one day ahead so that if I miss a day, I'm fine. And in fact, I might do 2 live streams today because I want to get ahead for the weekend where I might not stream. Before we get into day 8, let's go over day 7, which was Precious. I didn't want to do the Lord of the Rings thing. I feel like a lot of people did jewelry or something like that. What I did is this kind of like plant growing animation inspired by Wall-E. It was like the last, or rather the first plant showing that Earth is indeed habitable. And what I didn't show, and this is off stream, I did this kind of like stop motion time lapse, like one photo is being taken a day. Of course, the lighting doesn't really change because I didn't, well, I thought about it, but I didn't do it. But look at the ground here, how it kind of expands outwards. So pretty happy with how that one came out. Fine. And again, before we start the shill, you can get the project file, everything up till yesterday, because today doesn't exist yet, at cgmatter.com. You literally type that. There's a link in the description. And in here, you're going to see all Nodevember up till day 7. And today, or tomorrow, I will populate day 8. And the other important thing is go to free nodes. You don't need to be a member on the site to download free nodes. I recently pushed an update for nodes I wish I had in the last live stream. So that's what I'm doing. If there's a node that wasn't there, I add it. Okay? So what is the topic for today? The topic for today is Bejeweled, which is also spelled incorrectly. This is the second time. I think riveted is also spelled incorrectly. I don't know if it's like a UK thing, but I think across the board, this has a single L. Okay? And this is especially why for Precious, I didn't want to do any kind of jewelry because I knew Bejeweled would be coming up next. Now, what I imagine is a lot of people are going to do a diamond, which is kind of what I'm going to do, but I want to take it a step beyond that. So, what am I going to do? Well, here are some of my references. I want to make a intricate crown. So here's kind of like a classical king's crown with fabric. Here's one that's more radially symmetric. It is kind of like a vector graphic kind of thing, but I like all these floral patterns. I might look into that. And here's one where like I would instance every single point with a jewel. So half the battle is getting these gems, and half the battle is figuring out what I want to do with the crown. And I think if I make one section of it, I bend it and I radially instance it. And that's it. So I only have to make a quarter or an eighth of the crown. Okay? So let's do it. I'm going to be using Blender 5.0 as of recording, 4 days, which makes it Saturday, Sunday, Monday. On Tuesday, Blender 5.0 proper comes out, which I'm excited about because I want to make the node pack have 5.0 only nodes that I've been avoiding for now because it wouldn't be compatible. Okay, so let me save this file. This is day 8 of Nodevember. And inside of here, we have Nodevember day 8. And I'm going to spell Bejeweled with a single L correctly. Incredible. Incredibile. So I guess the question is, what order do I want to do this in? Do I want to make gems first, or do I want to make the crown? I probably want to make the crown first because that might inform the kind of gems I need to make. Are they big? Are they small? Are they repetitive? Are they not? So that's what I'm going to go for. So here's my game plan. Like I said, my game plan is I'm just going to make one rectangle, and I'm going to make this super detailed. A lot of stuff going on here. Once I do that, I'm going to instance it in a normal array. And then once I have all of that done, so I have just like a bunch of copies over here, I'm going to take this and radially bend it. That way I don't need to work on circular geometry, which would be substantially harder. So let's make something and see if we can get the bending to work for us. Almost like a curve modifier. So I am going to start, I guess, with a grid, as all good things do. Let's turn on snapping. Okay, so I'm going to start with a grid, and I want this to be facing camera. So I'm actually, the whole time, I'm going to be looking down the y-axis. So I need to rotate by 90 degrees here, but a rotation, not a translation. Make that twice as wide, and for now, I'm just going to add some geo. So let's do 10 by 10. And I want to make sure that this is something that I can wrap around. So to get this to instance in a way where one ends and the next begins, I need to know the width of it. So in this case, it's kind of very predictable, like we have a width of 2. And I might just keep that so that the math is simple. So what I would do is I would instance on points. We kind of need a linear array, so I'm going to use a mesh line. That mesh line is not going to go vertical, but instead, it's going to go horizontal with a spacing of 2 units. Okay, so you have to imagine there's 10 of these spaced by 2 units. On those, I'm going to instance this, which we want to make sure they're actually like ending where they should and there's no overlap. So what I can do is I can scale just the instances. Yeah, and that's working. Then at the very end here, I'm going to take whatever I made, I'm going to realize it, and then the challenge is how to wrap it around. Well, to wrap it around, all we need to do is pick a pivot point, and as we go down the line, we orbit it around here, but by a bigger number, so the angle kind of increases. So I guess one simple thing to do is I'm going to transform all this by 1 unit, which is half the width, so that it starts at the origin. And then the question is, how do I want to wrap it around? Well, whatever it is we end up doing, we're definitely going to modify the position. And I want to do an orbit. So I'm going to do a vector rotate, because whatever we're doing, we're definitely going to rotate the position. And then the question is, well, we know we're doing it on the z-axis, that's fine, but what is the center point? And I guess that kind of depends on the radius we want. So if I put it right here, and we'll say this is a radius of 1 meter, as we sweep along, it needs to kind of map onto this unit circle somehow. So let's set the center at 0, 1, 0. So effectively here. And I'm going to make the angle 0. Now, why is this doing something? Weird. That was like a visual artifact. Okay. So I rotated about the center by some angle. So you can see how it's kind of sweeping this over here. And that angle is going to be dependent on how far along the y-axis we are. Okay, so I'm going to take the position. I think I added a node called separate position. So this will easily give us the X, Y, and Z without having to use two nodes for that. I'm going to normalize the field, so it goes from 0 to 1. So this is going to be our angle. And you can see it's kind of making part of a circle. Specifically, it's going from 0 to 1, which represents 1 radian, which makes me think I just multiply this by 2 pi, but let's check. So this is 1, I increase, increase, increase. Aha! It creates a spiral, which unless we want to make a spiral crown is kind of an issue. So what this tells me is we got to make sure that the center point is at exactly the right spot such that we don't get this kind of spiral wrapping, okay? Well, let's think about it. If we know that this has a length of x, let's call it, so that's the width, we know ultimately that needs to be the circumference, okay? So this circle is going to have a circumference equal to x. And then what does that mean the radius is going to be? In other words, how far up is this? Well, we know circumference is equal to 2 pi r is equal to x. So now the question is, what is the radius? That's what we're trying to solve for. Well, then the radius is going to be x. The width, probably should have made it a w divided by 2 pi, in theory. Okay, so that means the center point isn't this arbitrary thing, but it is the total width, which I have a node for, field range. And did I just want to make sure I brought in my assets and then make a duplicate. No, that should be fine. So I'm going to take how far it is along the x-axis, get the range. That should be a single number. And then that, depending on if we're doing radians or degrees, but I'm going to assume radians, is going to be like that. So that's going to be the radius that we shifted up on the y-axis. And hopefully that does it, because otherwise we're going to need to think again. So, ooh, no, so close, so close. What did we do wrong here? So we have the position. That's what we're changing about the axis. I normalize the field. So the only thing that could be wrong is the radius. So let me play with it and figure out what that right number is going to be. Well, we know we need to go 2 pi rotations, 2 pi radians. So what is this magic number? It's like giant. Weird. Weird. Let's do a multiplication instead. So is it that the bigger it is, the more accurate it's going to be? Interesting. So we could either do that and transform it, or figure out exactly what it's supposed to be, which is kind of like ideally what I want to do. I guess it doesn't matter if it's like a really good approximation, but I'm trying to think. We could also just use sines and cosines if we wanted to. But before that, we have some center point, which has some radius r. All of this has a distance, which is supposed to be the circumference x. Circumference is equal to 2 pi r, which means the radius should be this range divided by 2 pi. Is that incorrect? Is this range correct? Let's see. So I set this to point, which means it's going to take max minus min. That's exactly how I would do it. So that's kind of strange. That's kind of strange to me. Let's see if there's any insights. Radius is equal to circumference divided by 2 times pi. Yes, we are there. We are there. But then the question is, why does that not work? My only answer is that it's in degrees. That's my only answer. So like let's see, to radians, 2 degrees. Yeah, that'd be like my only answer, because like all of a sudden it's quite accurate. Let's bring up the resolution here. How do I want to do that? I want to increase, it's either the X or the Y. Let's bring up the X. Yeah, that's weird. That's weird. What if we take this and we multiply by 360? Almost. Almost. So we could either think about this or we could use the sine cosine trick. Maybe we should just use the sine cosine trick, right? So what is the sine cosine trick? Well, I'm going to keep this off to the side because we might reuse it. But the sine cosine trick, what it is in essence, is I have this little strip over here, and I want to map it onto a circle, unit circle, let's say. Well, we know that exactly the x and y coordinates are sine and cosine, and then any detail we add here will be extruded off the circle. But now the only issue is, if I want to make super, like, cool shapes, would that be possible? I think so. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, we need some of this stuff over here, is I'm going to take the x position, I'm going to normalize it, that way I know it goes from 0 to 1, and then I'm going to multiply it by 2 pi. The reason I'm doing this is the period of sine and cosine is exactly 2 pi. I'm then going to combine a custom position where the x is the cosine of this, and then the y is the sine of this. So this should make a circle. But now the only issue is it doesn't have its height. Well, for its height, we can just take this. And to actually see that a bit better, we have something like that. And then in theory, if we make it taller, it does that. Great. And then let's make it a bit more interesting, just to kind of check. How would we make it more interesting? I need to take one of these instances and do something cool to it. So maybe let's delete geometry, or maybe we can separate by index. That's on cgmatter.com. I'm going to separate a face where the index is not equal to a certain number. So I can punch something out. So I'm going to punch out the top one here. Okay, so you can kind of picture that this would be instanced, and then that would be wrapped. And now we have that, right? So whatever it is we do here kind of propagates radially. And then the question is, what if this isn't flat, but instead there was some kind of extrusion, right? So let's say I take this and I extrude it, but only sometimes, or rather by random value. So let's just say for a second this is our design. When we instance it, it looks like this, you know, repetitive, nice. Can we get cavities on here? It is. Shadows. Okay, so we have this repeating pattern, but now when I do this, the geometry is there. It's still the same amount of geometry, but it wraps on as if it doesn't care. Now, the reason for this is our equation for wrapping only looks at the x-axis. It only looks at this, and then the height is the z, but it doesn't look at this extrusion value. And that extrusion value should be how much offsetted is it from the circle. So I guess one way to think about it is you can kind of do a multiplier. I don't know if that's the way to go. I kind of have a different idea, but just to start, I can do a multiplier, and let's say that's by some number. So now when we look at this, you can think of this as the radius, but that is not going to be a number. It's going to be based on this y-axis, which initially is going to give us something like that. Why is that the case? Well, by default, I want to multiply by 1 and then add any contribution here. So I'm going to take the y and I'm going to increment it. That's why I made that node. I'm going to increment it. So now we have that. You can see it is inverted. So, you know, two ways to go about that. I can either extrude it the other way, or I could probably more simply multiply by -1. And then in this case, if I wanted it to be more detailed, and so far all I've basically done is I could have done a cylinder and extruded faces. This would give me the same thing, but this is going to give us much more control. And you'll see that later. But what was I going to say? Instead of this, I could run my solidify node. Individual faces like this. It's going to give us the same thing, but now it's not hollow. Like that. And then I would make this less tall. And that's a pretty good system. So I think now the name of the game is making something good that we wrap with an instance and give it a lot of geo. Could we have just used the circle curve? So far, yes, but we're going to do different things to it. It will always be a spiral as the angle increases by using the x values as inputs. Guess you should use sine and cosine instead. Yeah. And thank you, XGamer. Very nice. Okay. Yeah, this is the Burger King vibe. Okay, so let's consolidate because we at least have this idea here. So what do we have so far? I have our instancing. What is it that we're instancing? It's going to be this crown. Whatever it's going to be this segment. So I'm going to keep it like this for now. I then instance it and shift it and realize it. The shifting is because it starts off at the middle. I just want to have it start at the origin instead. So all of this can be a node group. This can be called our array. Our array should have a counting parameter. So this can be called our iterations. And no matter what we pick, it should be fine. So here's iteration 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And visually, it's just like we're wrapping more or less. So let's do 4 for now. After we do that, we do our sine and cosine mapping. So I can get rid of this now. We take the x coordinate. I'm just going to clean this up. We take the x coordinate and use that for our sines and cosines. So that is always going to be the same. We are then going to take sine and cosine. We're going to multiply. For now, that's going to be the same unless I want to do a modification. And then we combine x, y, z. And then for the y-axis, that's going to be the extrusion in some sense. We increment by -1. Or sorry, we multiply by -1 to invert it. So this is going to be y. I hide it. I increment it. That goes there. That goes there. And then finally, I can bring this here, which is going to be the z component representing the height. So all of this I expect to keep pretty consistent, so I'm going to make this a node group. This is going to be our wrapping, like our circular wrapping. It should output this geometry, and I think additionally, it would be nice to take this y, that again we multiplied by -1, and just have like a value for this that I can edit, and that can be our like strength of like extrusion. So maybe this could be like radius multiplier, kind of. Not exactly. Kind of. And kind of is good enough for me. Okay. So all that is nice and tidy. And again, now what I'm claiming, at least, is the name of the game is doing stuff here. Now, we could make it very complicated, our like initial instance, and then do the wrapping, or we could make a simple version, do the wrapping, and then on that, we do a bunch of instancing. So it's kind of up to us. So again, now the question is, what do I want to do to this segment right here? Well, now would be a good time to bring in our reference. So what do I like? I definitely like this because it's capturing our idea of radial. And just based on looks, I like this traditional king's crown. So in this case, you could see there's almost 4 arches. There's one behind camera. Yeah. So how do I want to shape this? So I'm going to start off like this, and maybe I want to make, excuse me, I want to make like ridges at the top, just like this crown maybe. Well, to do that, what I need to do is I need to set position such that I offset it vertically, or in other words, on the Z, and then by what? Well, I'm going to take its position and normalize it so we get that nice 0 to 1, which I love. And then that, I don't want to plug it in right here, otherwise it's going to be diagonal, which is interesting in its own right. So now we can make quite complex shapes, but I want to take this and do some kind of interpolation. Did I make a note for that? You bet I did. So here I have a Gaussian interpolation, here I have an arch interpolation, here I have a spike interpolation, and all of that is going to become more detailed as I bring up the detail. So again, the name of the game is getting some kind of nice interpolation. And just based on this, this is what it's making, right? So maybe what I want to do is I want it to go up and down, but be kind of spiky, okay? So I'm going to take this, I'm going to run it through a sine to get our waves. I expect to use a lot of sines and cosines, pretty sure, during this experiment. So I'm going to take the sine. To get a full oscillation, we have to not go from 0 to 1, but 0 to 2 pi. So that's one oscillation. Okay. And I don't want this to be so extreme, so I don't only want to multiply it, but it should do this more as it goes up. So the base basically doesn't move at all. So I'm going to make a multiplier where this time it looks at the the z coordinate. How tall is it? That can be our multiplier. So now we got something like that I will multiply again. And now we have a wave at the top. Okay? And now it's just a matter of shaping this wave. So maybe a good way to do this is I'm going to join these together and I'm going to move this off to the side so I don't have to keep going back and forth. So we have this like section that I'm instancing, and this is the result. Whatever I do here will transfer. So this right now is one oscillation. If I do an integer multiple, and it's important that it is an integer, it will still always perfectly line up. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And then I could do something more interesting. Very importantly, this end and this end must meet. Otherwise, there's going to be a kind of like a seam. Okay. What do I want to do? What do I want to do? Well, I like this up and down of the sine. I don't know if I like the shaping. So right now, sine goes from -1 to 1. So I'm going to normalize that to 0 to 1. So that's just going to make it half as tall. However, now my interpolation node, which assumes you have a 0 to 1 normalized field, can make more interesting shapes. Now, is it this one? Yeah. So I'm going to give it lots of geo to work with. What kind of interpolation do I want? We have Gaussian. We have arch. That's kind of interesting. Spike. Kind of depends what we're going for. I kind of like spike. And we can make that a bit more intense. I added a multiplier that just does that. Again, all of these nodes you're seeing that aren't default Blender are on cgmatter.com, absolutely for free, link in the description. Okay. So again, I could either like add stupid amount of detail here, which I might, and wrap it, or I could do it in the other order, where I wrap it and then add detail. Okay. So I think what I want to do next is I want to add some circular elements that are kind of like thin lines, if that makes sense. So kind of what I mean, and this is going to get messy, just bear with me. And I'm glad I put the crown on the side. That way I don't have to keep going back and forth. So what I mean is I'm going to extrude mesh, probably solidify. Well, let's solidify it first, what we have. Nice and thin crown, so this is solid. And then I want to extrude. But not everywhere. I want to extrude on stripes. So what I mean by this is if I look at this and I look at the wave texture, you can see how I can do this every so often. So if I make this my selection, will that work? I need this to be kind of thresholded, so it's 0 or 1. And maybe a lower frequency. So that's kind of interesting, for example. And then I could easily make it the other way, which is what I was initially envisioning. Although that's looking kind of messy. Why is it looking messy? Okay, so that's definitely an idea. Probably going to use it. Another thing I want to do, and I'll clean up parts of this in a moment, but another thing I want to do is we have this, but I want to have the profile not be perfectly straight, but kind of have at least a gentle rounding. And that can either be done here with the radial stuff, or it could be done here. So the question is, what is easier? I think here would be easier. So I take this segment and I want to bend it outwards like that. Sounds like a job for the interpolate node. So I'm going to set position. In this case, outwards means going on the y-axis. So I'm going to only affect the y-axis, and I should probably turn some of this into a node group for the website, but I only want to affect the y-axis as I go up the z. I'm going to normalize the field, and then I'm going to run it through a interpolate field. What did I call it? Am I crazy? What did I call it? I called it float interpolate. So that goes here, that goes here. Now we have this kind of bend, and I want the shape to be a arch. So kind of like a perfect circle that I'm going to scale like that. Does this do anything? No, because it's not connected. Yep, I mean, that's something. So I'm going to make that tinier. And then why does it not connect? It doesn't connect because of the solidify. That shouldn't just solidify based on the normal, but rather it should always go outwards. So for this, actually I didn't need to do that. For this direction, I can specify it such that it goes down the y, the minus y. Okay, so I think that's a pretty good start. So I'm going to consolidate some of this that I know I'm not going to edit. So this stuff right here is just going to be our like warping, I guess is a good way to put it. So either like warping or like profile might be a better way to put it. And I'm going to make sure that this is a parameter, but I'm going to multiply by -1 so it's easier to interpret from outside the node group. Okay, so we got our profiling. We got our initial grid that we're working with. What else do we got? Next, we set position, and that one, I believe, is the spikes. Yeah. So all of this. By the way, I know there's an add-on that cleans it up, but it doesn't do it the way I like it, so not really useful to me. I'm just going to stack it until it's until you can't even interpret it. Okay, so it goes through sine. It goes through a interpolation. Multiply. And I don't remember what this does. This is the height, and this is the spikiness. That I'm not going to change. This I'm probably going to change. Okay. There we go. So all of this should be a node group minus 2 parameters that I'm going to expose. So this can be called our like ridges or spikes or whatever. We have a, what is this one? I've lost the plot. Okay, so this bottom one should be a integer, I believe. So I'm going to say it, I'm going to call it count. Yes. And then the other one is going to be the strength. Yes. Okay, great. And now this is much more legible. And now that we have all that, we can choose, do I want to extrude or not? It's looking kind of whack. But is it nice? I don't know. I don't know if I like that. Okay, that I'm starting to like a bit better. So, because again, I want to basically end up defining what does and doesn't get joules, because that's the end game here. Now, what happens if I merge by distance? Does that help anything? So if I merge by distance, there is no difference. What if I do it here? Okay, so that cleans up some of the lines. Seems important. And okay, so let's go over. We have our initial grid. That one gets a bit of a bend. That one gets a bit of a, a ridge. It gets solidified, it gets lines, and it gets wrapped. Okay. And we want to pick a value such that this seam is kind of hidden a little. Yeah, something like that. And then also, do I want to distort? I mean, this is a way to get fancy. But I think it's starting to look a little too prestige, which of course it is. Okay. So this can be called our lines, which I think I'm going to use to create a lot of maps for where things should and shouldn't be spawned. Okay, so this is going to be called lines. It should have a threshold going from 0 to 1. An extrusion value that can be considered the strength. And I'm not planning to control this. It is a little too dense, I would say. Okay, I'm going to say I'm happy with that and don't plan to change it, which now allows me to clean up shop. Okay. And if there's ever any like mesh issues, I can always like remesh it later. Okay, so now the question is, do we like the base shape? I don't know. Do I? It's almost like that's too much. Ooh. And we can get some shapes that haven't even been planned yet. Interesting. Should probably be pretty thin. Okay. And I guess one interesting thought is what if I was to combine things together? So what I mean is I'm going to also have a version that's not as tall and has a different profile and a different count and no lines. Well, in that case, I can start like overlapping layers, but I'm not confident in that yet. Okay, so that's a pretty good base shape. What do I want to change? Yeah, okay. Okay, let's get our reference back up. So there's all these ornamental designs that I like a lot. And then there's the jewels. I feel like this is a good representation for the jewels. What if, you see how this one has like this ridge over here that the others don't? What if I do that? So I'm just going to look at this without the lines. And then what if I was to... I don't know if they need to connect. But let's say they do. So I'm going to add an arc. Okay? That arc is going to be a quarter rotation. And that is going to be a high resolution and rotated. Okay, so you can almost see how that's coming across. And then I take that and I shift it so that it's here. So this could kind of be the connection, right? And it's only 3 of them because of that. So really it's the iterations minus 1. So I'm going to increment this so it better represents what we're actually doing. Okay. Yeah, and then I can do these like fancy connections if I want to. I might. Okay. Curve to mesh. I don't want to use a circle, but this time I want to use kind of like a flat object, like a quad. That I'm going to make tiny, tiny, tiny. Why are there 5 of them? Was I wrong about that? Huh. Okay, so I have something like that. Notice that there is going to be pinching just because of the nature of the sine and cosine operation. Okay. So I think that's good. I think that's better to have than to not. And then the question is, what do I want to do with this? Like, it doesn't have to go all the way. It could be anything I want. Let's kind of just look at that. So I want to do things as long as these endpoints stay where they are. So for example, I could run a really low resolution distortion on this that only goes on the Z and the Y. Really low frequency. And it should not apply to the endpoints. So I take this, I have a invert that I added recently, and that can be the strength. Okay, so now it kind of fixes those endpoints, and to make it a bit smoother of a transition, I run the blur. Do I run the blur? Okay, so this is before and after. Obviously, I'm going to make it less strong. By the way, the mouse is glitching. I think I need a new battery or a better connection. Probably more annoying to me than it is to you. And then I'm going to use these coordinates to basically offset effectively the seed. And then we need to see what this ends up looking like. Huh. It leaves you going, huh. So one issue with the fillet curve is it will take points and connect them. So the reason I'm going back and forth from curve to mesh, mesh to curve is it allows me to fix that, allegedly. So you saw how it kind of rotated. I know set curve normal Z up. Well, Eh. Eh. Why does it look so stupid? I think it's because of the fillet curve, right? It looks too stupid. But it's almost like, no, that's too stupid. That's too stupid. I'm going to get rid of that. Cut my losses. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the shape without randomness, without distortion, because that seems to cause issues, especially with the pinching. So what if I move things up, okay, like this. No, like this. But I do that based on the spline parameter. So I want to move on the y by the spline parameter. Great. And then for this, I could run a float interpolation and see if I got anything nice here. Okay, Gaussian looks okay. Arch, that's okay. What about ease? I kind of like the look of Gaussian. Even if it's subtle. Okay, so this, yikes. Okay, so this is the before and after. Kind of makes it a flat top, which I think is pretty cool. And if I wanted to get fancy, it was tilting before, but could I use that to my advantage? Set curve tilt. The tilt is going to be the spline parameter, and that parameter is going to be multiplied by a number. Kinda, though. It might be too much. But even just a little tilt adds some interest. I need to think about that. Okay. Another interesting thing we can do, because again, we're going to end up bejeweling, all of this. I'm going to add a bit of smoothing, and then I'll finish my sentence. Yeah, that looks nice. Although we're going to be bejeweling all this, maybe we could add ridges to this, just like we did before. So let's see what this does. Yeah. So I can add ridges in this dimension by taking the scale, and I can take the spline parameter, multiply it by some number, make it sinusoidal, in other words, it's going to repeat, clamp that from -1 to 1 to 0 to 1, and scale. And then that's kind of like free detail over there. Yeah. Okay. We're getting somewhere now. And a lot of these like inconsistencies I might hide by adding this like cloth here. And do I want to threshold this? I might. Ooh. Ooh. Okay, I might need to use this stepped linear a bit more. What if I put it on the ridges? So stepped linear basically creates a little step function for this. Why isn't this weird? 4 steps. Weird. Okay, but I did like that. That was cool. It like basically informs where there should be jewels. And I kind of want to keep doing that, honestly. Okay, yeah, I think might change the look a little. And what if instead of an integer, I know it should be an integer so it fits, but I wonder if so right now it's 2. What if I make it 1.5? Oh. Okay, apparently it doesn't need to be an integer. So I can turn that count into a float. Yeah, and it needs to be a certain multiple of something, otherwise that happens. So 1, 1.25, 1.5. Okay, so I think it needs to be a multiple of 0.5. So maybe I'll go back to integer and then make sure that it is a multiple of 0.5. That seems to work nicely. And then what do I think about the height now that I know everything that I know? Oh, so good. You could get so weird with this. Okay, so wait, now that I know what I know, I want this to be thinner. Okay. And again, all these connection points I might smooth out, maybe, with an SDF. Yeah. Okay, okay, so that is great. So again, note that all we're doing is making a single chunk that gets wrapped here. We lost the plot a little, but that's fine. So we started off with an arc that I'm not going to modify. We then set position such that it has a bit of curve. So if I didn't do that, or did it differently, ooh. No, it should be flat on the top. We did a interpolation to basically distort the shape of it a little. Then I resampled it for quality purposes, although you could get stylistic with it if you wanted to. I don't want to. Okay. And then why did I resample twice? That's weird. Okay, so by 200, transform, that just has to be done so that it's facing the right way. Although, should we? Weird. Weird and cool. Okay, so we have to transform it. We have this quad that can have a certain thickness or thinness. I don't expect to change that. We have the spline parameter. This controls kind of the frequency of this. I think I'm fine with that. Maybe I'll keep it exposed. Take a sine wave. Take a step. Yeah, I almost want to go ridiculous with this. And then that all results in turning this into a mesh. Done deal. Okay, cool. And just in case we do this SDF stuff I'm talking about, I'm going to fill the caps so it's kind of like a solid object. And there you go. That is going to be a group where the only thing I want to control is the frequency of the thing, I guess. So I can call this frequency. This can actually be hidden. Whoops. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Hide. And there we go. Okay, what else? How about some black hole effects to finish this month? I don't know. Do you have plans of making a video involving the new geometry attribute constraint? Ah, I do know about it. If people don't know what he's talking about, I believe, so here I have the 5.0 beta. Let me see if it has it. So there should be a new constraint called geometry attribute. So basically, everything you do in geometry nodes is on the geometry level, which is fine. But what if you want to move an object, right? Like you want to change its location, not a set position, but its location. What object constraint does is it lets you hop between those levels by like sampling a point or whatever. You can inherit its rotation, transform matrix, whatever. Okay. So that is a node group. This is our arches. We join those. And then we have these lines that I think I only want applied to this. Yikes. Okay, I think that's all fine. And now we need to add more. So do we like the general shape? Because once I like the shape, then I'm going to start adding some goodies, you know? And I wonder what this looks like as a SDF. What was the radius about? I don't know why I would ever want to control that. Okay, we have our wrapping. What's this about? Oh, this was about putting it off to the side. Okay. So now we have our crown base. An hour in. Not bad at all. So now I wonder if you know what I mean. Now what I wonder is blah, 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 blah. How does SDF work here? Does it play nice? And I think from this point on, I'm just going to keep the purple because it's a better example of Bejeweled. What am I looking for? The spreadsheet. Does it play nice with SDF? Let's find out. So mesh to SDF grid. We can view that. Okay, that seems to compute pretty fast. And then we do grid to mesh. That plays pretty nicely. And note how fast it's computing. That's pretty impressive. So the idea with this is now I can make it a single mesh. That's only really if I want to clean up the connection points, which I don't necessarily want to do, but I could. There's something nice about it being connected. And if I do this SDF stuff, some of the advantage is I can do things in the middle, which I don't quite understand yet. That isn't important. Median, is that a smoothing? That's a smoothing. Well, I can start cutting holes and stuff like this without messing with booleans, or with mesh booleans. Median is a smooth. Laplacian? Oh, weird. So you can play with the curvature and stuff. And finally, Laplacian, which I think always messes it up. Okay. Can I like mix grids? Oh, you can mix grids. Interesting. Okay. So we have that if we want it. I'm going to just call this remesh with a voxel parameter in case I want to go back to that. Now, do I want to start cutting holes in this? Maybe, because that's something that like adds like very nice visible detail. So we have this, we profile, we add ridges, and maybe now after we make it 3D, we start punching holes in this. So is this manifold? I would love it if it was. Merge by distance. Yep. That's pretty good that it doesn't change the vertex count. That's a good sign. So now what I can do is along this, I can spawn a bunch of like circles that cut out or maybe a more interesting shape. So I'm going to run a mesh line for our instances. That's going to have a width of 2. So from 0 to 2, endpoints, instance on points, join, and then let's say a cylinder. And I guess it goes -1 to 1 until we do the shifting. Okay, so the idea is maybe we could punch holes. Although we don't want it at the, I don't know, maybe we do want it at the tips because then this hemisphere and that hemisphere connect. Interesting. Let's think about it. So I'm going to do this. And actually, out of interest, if I make this depth really tiny, but enough so you can see it, and just add loads of geometry, does that wrap nicely? It does. It does. It does. So that's something to note. Okay. So how many points do I want? Something that fits nicely in here. So that fits nicely. And then my question is, could I cut out things? That was my real question. So mesh boolean, this, I'm going to use manifold minus this. Ah, it likes it. And then does it wrap well? There we go. It almost wraps well. Almost. Maybe if I move it down a little. Nope. And I wonder if this is the issue where we have the multiples of 0.5. What if I set this to 4? I mean, that's pretty cool. And it's really fast. Like, I could just punch holes in this so fast. But I think it looked cooler when we joined them, I would say. So it's almost like we're adding buttons. So this isn't the jewelry yet. I still expect this to be kind of gold. But now when we remesh, yeah, now it becomes part of this really nicely. Yeah, that's cool. And then because it's a cylinder, I can also make it squares. And that looks way more bejeweled. Like you want harsh lines. Maybe this is how I can add a lot of detail. So maybe 6, maybe 4. 4 for sure. Okay. So we have that, and let's not give up on this quite yet. Or let's like take it up a notch, I guess, because there's more we can do. So what about I do the same thing, but now I do double. And they're going to be thinner. Yeah, it's all about finding that exact multiple, which kind of seems like a pain. But if I add it lower as its own detail pass, you might not even notice. Tricky, tricky. 5, 8. Like, what's a good multiple? You'd think you just multiply. Oh, what was that? It's not clear to me why some things do align and some don't, to be honest. Oh, and there's that tiny little gap there, which I could fix by making the mesh line a little less. So maybe like 0.9 to minus 0.9. Yeah, it's fine if there's like a double all of a sudden, because it's perfectly symmetric, right? Then I join that, and now we have to do the same thing. Minus 0.9 to 0.9. Okay. And then I take this depth, make it tiny, make it even tinier. Okay. And maybe, you know what? Maybe this one can be a negative. Where's my Boolean? Oh, I joined it. So I'm going to do a mesh Boolean from this minus that on manifold. Okay, so that punches out those circles. And then I join it with the ones that have the cylinders. Why is that not working? Okay, there we go. Okay, and now to see like you know how we had that issue where it's kind of like offsetted? It might be easiest to just kind of see it inside of here. Because if it works here, it will work everywhere. So let's turn on cavity mapping, a bit of shadow mapping. Great. Okay, so this one is fine. It's just the 5 that's weird. So 4, 6, 7, 8, 8. But that's because they're perfectly lined up. Why? So it's this one. So maybe every other one? No. And right now, obviously, I'm just experimenting. I'll figure out the exact thing later. Okay, I think I see the issue. This one and this one are considered the same island, so I don't want it here and here, which is why 8 worked so well, and so will 4. So I can just find the center point and the center point. I see. This one would be hovering, wouldn't it? That was the issue. Okay, so let's see what happens if I do every, skip every fourth. That looks nice. That looks nice. Okay, good. Okay, so take the depth, bring it up. Not the depth. Take the radius, bring it up so there's actual holes in it. Great. Great. And then we can make those holes and all that nicer just by... Ooh, nice. Just by bringing down the remesh voxel size. Now that'll be nice and clean. Okay. Let's read a comment or two. Okay, nothing there. No offense. Okay. So we got that. One thing I'm just interested in is these ridges are these lines. What happens if I double them? So I take this and divide by 2. No. I multiply by 2. No, definitely not. Okay, cool. So this might be the base of our mesh. Maybe. What if I also... I'm just trying to get like a good initial shape before we start. Oof. Be careful with that. Before we start doing things. So I'm going to take the separate position, normalize the Z. The thing's always rotated, which is why it's kind of weird to think about. And multiply. Yes. So now we can get this nice fading if I wanted to. So before, after, that way it's not so sharp and it can look like we modeled something much more complex. Okay, so I'm going to bring our float interpolation, and now it kind of looks like it fades on both ends. What about an arch? What about a spike? A Gaussian. Yeah, that's much nicer. So before, after. Just doesn't look like we joined things as much. Just kind of looks nicer. Okay. Now that we've done that, should we start instancing joules? Should we call the shape done? These are the questions I ask every day. Like, we can just get so much free detail just by, like, duplicating, though. So here you can see I'm just, like, doubling up on the layers. Like, that just adds so much detail. What if I was to... I don't think rotation is what I want to do. No. This way? Nope. This way? Maybe. And because we have the SDF, they can kind of poke through and not make a big issue. I don't know. Just an idea. Okay, so let's say this is our base mesh. Okay, so we do all this and we have the SDF. So let's consolidate. We have the line, which we instance the cylinder. And then we have the line where we instance this cylinder. And I'm just going to assume I'm not going to touch those for now. I Boolean them together. I add the arches. I do that. I do that. Okay, boom. How do I add free details to this without thinking too hard? And then we'll start making jewels. Well, one thing that I like the idea of is I'm going to look at a wave texture on this. And in fact, before we do that, since I'm happy with this, I'm going to bake it on disk, because if you don't do that, what's going to happen is Blender is going to take forever to save every single time. So bake the still, 34 megabytes, not bad. And then this should be very fast. So let's see, on the Z. So what I was thinking just now is that I can use this to shape it a little, right? So for example, I can offset by the normal, so I want it to grow outwards by this scale. So I don't know what it's going to look like yet. But you could see how this might be a way to get some free detail. But it needs to be quite sharp. Saw, triangle, sine. Yeah, definitely sine. Just some low frequency deets. Yeah. Right? So this is before and after. I think it adds something. And it's nice and symmetric, which I'm happy with. And let's add some general shaping to this. So I'm going to set position. So note how, like, you know, of a shape this is, you know what I mean? I'm not saying we're going to go for that, but I am saying that we can go for something more striking. So I'm going to separate position. I'm going to look at the height as a normalized field. And then I could use that to do something. I could either scale outwards or shift things up and down. I think I want to scale outwards. So I'm going to take the position and I'm going to multiply in a way that the z stays consistent, but the xy I can modify, right? So, okay. So by default, this should be 1, and then I can add any contribution I want. Okay, so you can see how that's reshaping. Let's see if we have anything nice in our interpolate node. So you can see how I can get some interesting shaping immediately. Maybe I throw this through the good old sine wave. And I know it's looking whack, but please bear with me. Maybe it should only be able to get thinner. Okay. Did that actually add something? It did. I kind of like this a little better. Even that. Ooh. Yeah. Okay, okay. Last thing I want to try, stepped linear. 2 steps. No. Okay, okay. So this is going to be, I don't even remember what this is. This is our like sine offset, but kind of so is this in a way. But like one goes after another. I don't really plan to edit these, so I'm just going to stack them. And it might be true that doing this as one operation is the same. Let's just see if that's the case. So we have this. Is this any different than this? It's not. Okay. Offsetting and doing a position is the same as doing a position and offsetting in this case, because they don't seem dependent on each other. Okay, so all of this is going to be a nice node group. I can call this add waves. Cool. And now let's say we're done. So I'm going to throw another bake here, bake that, close that. Okay, let's do joules. So to do joules, what I need is to make some joules. And there can be, it kind of seems like what looks good is to make them very geometric and throw a glass shader onto there. I think that's kind of the secret, right? And by the way, I should mention, you already know, but every free node, like the normalized field, whatever, you can get at cgmatter.com for free. For free. Don't even need to be a member. What will happen is you get that add-on. That will be called, when you install it, that will be called CG Matter Nodes. And you're going to have a allow online access so that you can download the nodes and update them, which will basically just overwrite this asset path again and again until you like it. Okay, so let's make some jewels, some good old jewelry. So with that, join. I don't even remember what this is anymore. So it's not just booleans, it's whatever, it's just called details. Good enough. So arches and crown. Okay, so all of this at the end of the day, however many nodes it is going to be our crown. Okay, let's make some diamonds. So this is super, super easy. So to make a diamond, at least these nice geometric ones, all you need to do, and I was thinking about this on the car ride home today. So all you do is you take a mesh circle. In this case, let's make it 6-sided. You fill it. And the way I'm thinking about it is the diamond shape kind of has these lines that go downwards. And then they all meet at a point. And it can be more complicated than that, but that's the basic diamond shape. In other words, extrude mesh. I'm going to do it downwards. I'm going to solidify mesh instead. Downwards. And then you want to poke the face. In other words, if I look at the wireframe, I want to triangulate this, or I did make a poke faces node, which will do the same thing. In this case, it's pretty much identical to triangulate, although maybe let's poke faces, because that adds some nice stuff. And then you want to take this face down here and bring it, or sorry, that point there and bring it down. What is the easiest way to do that? Well, to select that point, we know it's in the middle and it has a negative z value. That's what uniquely defines that point. So let's take the length of the position. In other words, how far is it from the origin? Check where it's equal to 0. And additionally, the z component should be less than 0. Both of these have to be true. And when both of these are true, I'm so comfortable with setting the position downwards. Didn't like that, did it? Why? The length is equal to 0, and the z component is less than 0. That's the case, right? Is it this is too sensitive? I guess that was too sensitive for some reason. Oh, I forgot. It needs to be a distance of 0 in terms of the x and y if I'm looking at it from the xy axis, right? So we want to kind of get rid of the 3D components. So I'm going to multiply by 110. There you go. And now this could be an epsilon of 0.001. Additionally, when I solidify, I might want to scale this ring right here to be a bit bigger. And by default, I don't add that option, but I should. So inside solidify extrude, I also want to know the top. Does that make any sense? Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to expand it. So the position should be scaled on the thing. Scale elements for this, like that. And there we go. We have a diamond that is procedural in the sense of now we have a triangle diamond, now we have a square, and we could even, you know how we did that poke faces, we can do that to add even more intricate detail that refracts. Now, I gotta pee so bad. So I'm gonna leave you to talk to each other. Have some insights. You know, you all have something in common. You're all geo bros. Geo bros. Let me try that again. And before I go pee, yes, finally able to join the live stream. Glad you made it. Going to pee. Didn't want that though. Okay. Did the one person that chatted something like their playdate, do you still use Serpents to make your GeoNode add-ons? I do. If not, how's your workflow allow people to install the setup from the code if that's what you do? I use Serpents to answer your question. As for the free nodes thing, it just auto download. It fetches it from the website, which I update from my end. So I could either have it end there, or I could have it like end flat. I think I like that. So all of this might actually cover almost every single use case if I use enough parameters. I think this part's actually going to be the easy part, weirdly enough, even though it's the more detailed part. So this is the part that moves down that one vertex. We poke faces, I scale elements. Okay. So I'm going to turn this into a node group, but it's very important I expose some things. I want to make sure I have the number of vertices. It's very important that I have how tall is it, like how much do I solidify it by, which I'm going to multiply by a negative number, just so it's easy when it's exposed. So right now it's a third, so that's going to be a third. I also want to expose how much this is scaled by. And finally, I think I want to know how far down this goes. It only matters not for modeling, but really for the purposes of refraction. Okay, so tip height, two inches from the ground, if you know what I mean. And what's this one? Number of vertices is pretty clear. This value is the solidify amount. Tip height. That is incorrect. This should be the tip height, and this one should be the ring scale or whatever. As long as I know what each one means externally, then we're good. And I believe that's everything we need. So let's make sure, because I think this might be a case where I actually do a for each zone. We'll see. If that is the case, it's great to have this. So I'm going to call this gem. So we have the number of vertices of our gem. We have kind of the solidify. We have the ring scale, and we have the tip height. So that lets us make all kinds of jewels. And we have two options. We can either instance them here, which I don't think I want to do because now I don't have any details about the mesh, right? If I look in here, it's just, super detailed. But I think what I want to do is I want to do the same wrapping process. So I can actually skip most of this and just go to the array section and then do wrapping. Yes. Okay. I could do the wrapping and then I can separate them back out. Sounds good to me. So where do I want these to be? Well, if I look at my initial strip, this is where I want to add those details in. So maybe it can be on those arches, or maybe it can be on lines, on, wherever I want. So let's see. I have this. Okay, I'm going to start by adding a ring of them on the bottom. So this is just going to be a lot of instancing, or for each zone. So I'm going to instance on points. Which points? The ones that are on the bottom. So I'm going to get the Z position and look at its normalized field such that I can see what the bottom is. In other words, where's the height equal to 0? On that, I will instance my gem. Yes. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Okay. This gem should be super tiny. And you can see now it's kind of on this bottom band over here. The gem, I want to make sure it's centered. So I'm going to transform it so that it goes to its center of mass, cgmatter.com for the nodes. Scale by -1 to shift it. So now it's at its center of mass origin. And they should be, where are they? So they go here, they go here. Aha, I don't want them arrayed. I want them here. Okay, so they're going to be down here. I want to make sure generally they're pointed outwards. So the rotation should be based on the normal of where they spawn. So align rotation to vector will let me choose a vector based on a rotation based on a vector like the normal. And it's one of these. You never know which one. It's really hard to tell. Okay. So Z, Y, X, auto. Okay, it's definitely this one. The issue is the lowest points are here rather than there. So maybe equal to 0 with some threshold, like 0.1. Oh, because it gets solidified? Yeah, because it gets solidified, that's why. Okay, so now we have them on both sides. Okay, I believe that's correct. So here we have a bottom strip of jewels that I can have varied. Okay, so I can have them varied. Maybe the easiest way is I want to control the spacing. So I can take this selection, right, over here. I could go mesh to curve for that selection. So now I have these two curves. That I can resample. Maybe. Okay. So I have this, which is kind of what I want, but I want to have this, I don't want the connection parts like a ladder. So I want to separate by points. Edges, faces. No, I want to separate by points. And then I want to delete any edges that are facing this way. So basically what I want is I want the two strips. Which at this point you might be thinking, why don't I just... Whatever. So I'm going to delete edges, only edges and faces. edges. Oh. Yeah, the ones that were pointing horizontally. So in other words, I can take the direction they're facing, that's going to be the two vertices that make up an edge. I subtract their difference and I see which ones, I can take an absolute value, I can see which ones are pointing down the y-axis. So what this does is it isolates edges that point in a certain direction. There we go. So we've isolated these two strips. Now we instance on points and we only have it in some areas. And let's see what that gives us. Okay. We have that. But now we don't know the orientation. So I need to store those normals for later. Norm. And then for the rotation, instead of using the normal, hopefully that attribute survives. It does not, because we store it on faces. There we go. So now they're facing outwards. Great. But the idea of turning this into a curve was to be able to resample. So now I can choose kind of their spacing. So there's one row. Additionally, I want to make a second version. So maybe actually let me take all this and throw it inside of here so that it centers itself before outputting. I'm going to make a second version. So this could be a hexagon. I can make a quad version. So you can see if I swap these, I get two different kinds, and I can have them alternate. I can do this by picking instance. And to pick an instance, I need to have two instances. I join them together. And then as the selection, is it already doing what I want? Let's see, instance index. Index of the instance used for each point. This is only used when pick instance is on by default. Okay, so this will let me pick which one. And I'm going to take the index modulo 2. So it goes 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, I think. Yeah. So this will let me create any kind of pattern I want. So in this case, I'm going to go 0, 1, 0, 0. And then to wrap it, because I don't want this to be part of the main geometry, but to wrap it, I can realize these instances that are already facing the correct direction and then perform a wrapping. Yes. I believe that is correct. And then we take this, we join them, and then they, after the remeshing, so they come along for the ride. Let's see what that looks like. We cannot see them. But why? Nothing's connected there. And then we need to rebake. So for now, let's just look here. Where are they? They must be slightly inside. I know it's a mess. Okay, so I can do that. And I can, I guess I could just move them downwards, but I want them to kind of go outwards off of their normal. So how do I do that? I separate this into that. I then offset them by the normal I stored, scaled by a certain amount, I assume. Okay, so what did that do? So here we have our ring. Then as I scale it outwards, yeah, just by a tiny amount. And now these should poke out. All that work for one band, but don't worry, we can do better. Okay, so we've put down the groundwork for this, and then we just have to say where to instance. So right now, we are instancing based on this. And what if I was to instance based on this? Then we'd have many more places to instance. So now we have all these lines where I instance the gems in an alternating pattern. Those end up wrapping around after loading for a long time. Okay, those end up wrapping around. Great. I think the lesson I learned is that needs to be way sparser. I'm going to move this for now. So that needs to be that. And let's do 30. So that should be faster. And then we get a pattern like this, which is fine. Let's just see what that looks like. That's not bad, minus the parts that make no sense. That's not bad. Okay, so we just have to push this idea further. Where are they? Where are they not? Maybe another thing we could do, by the way, is it could be like more of a dense design, like where it's super, super bejeweled. So in this case, I have this remesh. Yikes, I have the waves. I do this. This might, if this works, I would rather do it like this. So distribute points on faces. Now we have these points. I'll make it a lot of them. I instance on those points in a way where I pick the index. And then we just copy this logic here. So I pick every other. Then I scale by a tiny number. And then I have them off of the normal. And then I think about it for a long time. Yeah, so that's shit. Poisson disk, so they have to be a certain distance apart. Ooh, that's kind of nice. Okay, divide by 5. So that will create this, which of course is obscene. But maybe I do want obscene. I can also have it dodge certain areas. And then the question is, how do I randomize them? Well, I have their rotation, and I added a random rotation node, cgmatter.com. That will let me add a contribution like that by a tiny amount, so they're not all facing the exact same way, and then they catch the light. I mean, honestly, it's lazy, but it looks nice. Forget all this. We'll just store some attributes for later. Okay, I think maybe a good way to check the quality of this is to see what it looks like in context. So this is more like, let me see if I can find reference. This is more like a diamond dress where it's just crazy. Just crazy. Okay. So we did all that. We did the remeshing. We did this. Okay. We have two kinds of gems. They're hexagons and squares. Those could be anything. They could be triangles. Maybe this could be an octagon. They go every other. Okay, and now they need to avoid certain areas. So I want them to avoid these notches, for example. And maybe I want them to avoid certain parts of the crown. Well, to do that, I can at any point expose the details. So for example, at some point I take these instances and I join them here, which I assumed I realized, but I guess that doesn't matter. Either way, I'm going to store an attribute called avoid. That's going to be set to 1. Do I even need to do that? I do, because it needs to wrap around. So now we have this, which is wrapped around. I can separate by geometry. And let's go back to spreadsheet. We're at 2 hours. Okay, so we have a void. What are we looking at? We have a void. Some of these should be enabled. Yeah, some of them are enabled. And then this is what I separate by to keep those sections. And the reason I didn't just like bring them out of the node group is they needed to wrap around, remember? So now we have that. But why is it not? Oh, because it needs to wrap first. Okay, so now we've isolated those sections. And then we can say spawn everywhere except for like when you're close to that. Right? So I distribute points on faces, but then for example, I could delete the points that are a certain distance from this. So if the distance is less than some number, then delete it. We look at this, and then we make the number bigger. There we go, and now they avoid those sections. So it's almost like we modeled it, but we're kind of getting it for free. So we can kind of highlight certain areas that we like, right? So like another example is these like lines over here. We should probably highlight. So we got those here. We got those here. And then for that selection, you do that. So I'm also going to store this avoid attribute. Okay, yeah, now I'm starting to like the way we're doing this. I'm going to store the avoid attribute for this. So now it should also try to avoid those lines. Perfect. Yeah, this is the way to go. And what I was saying is that I wanted to see a cycles render. That'd be neato. Okay, cycles, GPU, render, and of course we're going to add so many materials, so many gems. Okay, so this should be the shader that I look at the world and I add the boring sky texture. And to make this actually visible, we need a material, which we now have, and that material should be applied to everything such that I can darken it. Yeah, I think I like the way that looks. We're going to jewel it up. Okay, so we can call this our gold material. I'm going to make a gem 1 material. I'm going to make a gem 2 material, and would you believe it? I'm not going to make any more. Okay, so set material for this. That one's going to get gold. We're then going to create 2 instances, one of which gets gem 1, one of which gets gem 2. And let's consolidate a little. Okay, consolidate it a little, and now let's get some like basic materials on here. So for the gold, we're going to make it accurate later, but for now I'm just going to make it kind of like a yellowish, metallic, reflective thing. We'll figure it out later. And then for the gems, these get the royal treatment of transmission, low roughness, and a deep color like red. Similarly, gem number 2 is going to get the same treatment, but maybe this one's like a deep purple. Let's see what that looks like up close. Do any of these get the... Yeah. Oh, wait. No, I did. Full transmission, specular, anisotropic? No. Okay. I'm not going to lie. It's looking like actual dog poo-poo. But we will fix that. And I think this would look best if there's like many, many, many like super tiny jewels. So set shade smooth. I'm going to lower the size and up the number of them, and then to respond, they get a random value from 0 to 0.01 in this case. And like, I want it to be like ridiculous. Ridink. Yeah, just sickening. Sickening amount. Until it's almost like glitter, you know? Yeah. And for this one, I'm going to go with my standard 4x3 orthographic. Orthographic? Yeah. Orthographic view. Although this might be a case where perspective looks better. Yeah. Okay, now we get our opportunity. Ooh, ooh, it's all the lighting. It always was the lighting. And the reason I don't use an HDRI, by the way, is I consider it cheating for Nodevember, of course. Okay, and we're going to add so many free details using shaders. But yeah, now this is looking proper Bejeweled. And if we wanted to go crazy, we could not just make it red and yellow, but it could be based on the instancing. Let's see. Does this give random? No, it's all 0 to 1. Object info. Okay, that gives us our randomness. And then what I'm saying is instead of just picking a single color, we go nutso. We go nutso. So this is our hue on this color, and we get like every color. But that's like nutso, nutso, right? So maybe it can affect the saturation, the value. No. So roughness was 0.146. So let's go from 0.1 to 0.2. And one thing I haven't talked about that matters a lot is if we go in close, you can see this kind of like refracted light situation. It's so dependent on the IOR. If I set it to 1, all of a sudden they kind of disappear. And as I make it bigger, they're going to like reflect light more and more intensely. So I'm going to do something like glass 1.55. Yeah, now this is Bejeweled. I'm going to take its proximity allowance, which is this one. Bring it in a little closer. And then for the crown material, which really has to carry, right? It's got to be good. Ooh, copper's kind of nice. I want to add some special normal mapping. Now, here's a trick. If you use Voronoi texture, okay, at a very high scale, you're going to see it kind of makes these cells. It makes these cells. I believe you can use this or some variation of this to get hammered metal. Okay? It will take us a second to get there. So this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be weird, but you can see how we could get there. So let's see. Let me add around a detail, around a roughness, less random. Okay. We make the strength real tiny, and you can see how that almost comes across as hammered metal, especially as I make it shiny. Ooh, okay. Another thing is we could add sparklies to the material itself. So I would actually also use a Voronoi texture for this, and here's how I would do it. I would set this to a super small number, which you can think of as a lot of dots that I want to make sure are normalized with their coordinates. You check where's this distance less than a certain number, which will focus on these dots. You bring this up like really high, and then you could do something with that, like it could glisten or whatever. So let's say I connect that to the roughness. You see how that kind of starts showing up? But I wouldn't do it like that. What I would do is I'd probably add a clear coat with this color. Something like that. Also, what we could do is we don't only get this dot map, but each dot gets a color. So you could do something cool with that. How do I want to do this? Let's see. What happens if I make this fully rough, and then I add a clear coat, where the color is dictated by this. Okay. And the weight, the roughness, what's the roughness? I mix color so that it's white almost everywhere, except for at these dots. So I have that perfectly inverted. So it's going to be hard to see, but it's white except for these dots that I'm going to make a bit bigger. And these might be our sparklies. Let's see. Like you can barely even tell. Another option, if we don't want to do that, is we can always like make it glow. Doesn't need to be real. So I'm going to take the strength, and now it's going to have little glowing areas. Don't like that. The thing is, this is just so dependent on the environment. I'm going to look up what is the IOR of gold. Index of refraction. I think gold is like 0.5 or something, actually. Gold is GLMNO 0.47. Oh, oh, oh. I didn't realize black was an option. Ooh. Ooh. Okay. What if I make it glass? Just make it make no sense. Doesn't matter. Because it's metallic. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is I think, so this is a good setup to begin with. I want to try my own custom lighting. See how I do with that. So let's actually get rid of the environment and start lighting this bad boy. So we start with a edge light, which should be like super impactful because of all these jewels and stuff. Yeah, you can already kind of tell. So this is going to be a strength of 40. I did not type in anything, a strength of 40. And this might be a case where, at least for preview mode, I reduce the number of gems. Or I could bake it. I'll reduce it for now. Hopefully this lets it compute faster. Actually, now that I mention it. I'm going to do something controversial here. I'm going to realize it because I think, weirdly enough, it goes faster than instances, ultimately. I know it makes no sense. But I'm operating solely on vibes here, okay? Is that any faster? I think it is. Okay. So I'm going to give it a bit of radius. Then what height? Like, there's no way to do this where it isn't like an edge light, right? Like, everything's so shiny. Okay, that's a good start. I'm going to duplicate that light and bring it forward. This can be softer, but way stronger. Okay. Then we do our 3-point lighting. I'm not gonna lie, this looks way worse than the sky texture. Like if I got rid of these. You gotta admit defeat. Okay. So I think what we do for the render is I'm literally just gonna keep this where it is, but I'm gonna rotate it and it's gonna catch the light and it's gonna sparkle. And to get Bejeweled, we're gonna do so much glare. Okay, so let's do this, and see if we can get a stable render that doesn't kill it. Not bad. Okay. Oh, I didn't get my render passes. Whoops. Ambient occlusion, normal position. Yeah. Cryptomat for sure, so I can isolate the gems. And then because this is so precious, like the bokeh on this thing is going to be so good. You ready for this? You ready for this? I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to make it tiny. Not that tiny, though. But it's going to look so precious. Like, here. Let me find a good example. Yeah, you see these like tiny bokeh balls? It looks so nice. Okay, so I want to focus roughly here. And now let's make this beautiful. It's all in the colors. Okay, great. Compositing. Let's make this bad boy shine. So I always like starting with an ambient occlusion pass to just kind of highlight some of those areas. So I'm going to do a mix. Ooh. But really though. Okay. I'm going to do an ambient occlusion pass that I multiply. So this is before and after, and you could crank that up. Just get that detail. I might have to go black and white. Yep, probably that one. Probably a mix of them. Okay, so let's start with streaks. No, let's start with simple star. I'm going to make it a little higher tolerance so that not everything can do it. So here's how we do that. It's got to be big, I guess. Like that. Make the strength of that effect less. What does that look like now? Okay. What about a fade? What about a fade this way? It's just like way too much. Does streaks have this issue? It does. Like, geez, how much do I need to crank this? I'm like really tempted to make this black and white. But before I do that, because it kind of feels like a cheat, like everything looks good black and white, just want to play with this. Come on, though. Come on, though. Like, to me, that indicates I picked the wrong colors, of course. But come on, though. Okay, I'm doing it. We're going black and white. So we got that. Let's get rid of that glare for a moment. So that ambient occlusion looks extra good when it's black and white, because black and white images are supposed to be high contrast images in my mind. Ooh, crispy. Crispy. And what if instead of doing it like this, I do it manually, which will let me exercise an idea. I have an idea to reintroduce color. I'm going to bring in my crypto mat, which isolates, certain sections. So I'm going to do this one. So now we have, nope, I wanted literally the opposite. Just want the gems. Okay, so there are at least half of the gems. Okay. And then what I was thinking is I mix this version with this version by that, but the opposite though. Does that make any sense? What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it black and white, except for where there's gems. Right, kind of like that. It just don't look good. And now I can crank the contrast. Ooh, that's like too much. Soft vignette, even though you really already know where to focus. I want it to look more precious, like yesterday. More depth of field. more depth of field. I want it to be like stupid. And that could it be like hexagons? So here I have these circles. What if I made the f-stop, no, the blades hexagons? That will make it look more like, yeah. Mm. Two and a half hours. No interior environments, all Prestige. Unless I'm willing to make an interior environment procedurally, then no way. Oh, it's so good. It kind of reminds me of the movie with Anne Hathaway, where she's a princess. uh, don't remember what it's called. And then what if I use the normals? So I'm going to take a dot product. I'm going to clamp it. Okay, so this will let me isolate certain directions. I don't know what to do with that information. Ooh. Ooh. Like, that's not it, but it is kind of good to know I can do that. Subtract. Cut away light. Ooh. That's a fancy way to up the contrast. Let's do it subtly, though. Yeah. A tasteful amount of sensor noise. Tasteful. Let's zoom in here. Before, after, not a chance you're catching that on YouTube or through the live stream compression. Now, one thing I gotta ask myself is, do I allow a shadow catcher? So far, I haven't. But, like, I just want to see. We might get rid of it. So I'm going to add a plane. That plane's going to be big. That plane is going to be such that it is sitting on it. Just like that. Like, I guess this counts as like a scene, not the actual object. But I kind of need to be convinced about that. So that's going to be black. Some light's going to spill. And then let's also give it a nice wall. Like, those caustics might make it worth it, though. I guess as long as I make that grid procedurally, it's fine. Okay. Yeah. Ooh. But should I? Like, I think I gotta, right? Let's see. No specular, some specular, all specular. What happens if I make this a shadow catcher, right? Nothing The reflections don't come through, do they? I don't think they do. Do people have opinions on this? Thank you for the king emojis. Yeah, but it's necessary though. Okay, as long as I make it procedurally, it counts. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna call it ground, and all I need to do is imitate this exactly. Easy. So I'm gonna add a grid. No, I'm gonna add an arc. Okay. That arc is gonna be 90 degrees. And maybe this should be a node group, what I'm about to make, but that's going to be 90 degrees. I'm going to rotate it by minus 90 and then bring it up by 1. Then can I scale? No. I then want to scale after the fact. Or do I make the radius bigger? No. I'm going to scale after the fact. Like that. And then I just want to extrude this endpoint, essentially. So I can do that by doing curve to... No, I'm going to set position. We kind of did this yesterday with Precious, the trick I'm about to do. I want to isolate the endpoint and move it. So let's see if I isolate this endpoint. Nope. Other one. Then I can kind of, pseudo extrude it. Like that. Great. And then maybe let's also bring the other one higher. Like that. Okay. Then curve to mesh. And then extrude mesh by edges. In what direction? In the y-axis by a number. And then take that and then transform it. Okay, so now I can get rid of that. And then make sure to shade smooth. So all of this nonsense can be our backdrop. And gosh dang it, it counts. Now to get this on the ground, I do have, but it would be very expensive to use a snap to ground. Not that expensive apparently. But I only have to do it once, so I'm actually going to throw snap to ground back here, rebake, throw on the material, and now it's all nodes. Exact same thing, but it's full procedure. Yeah. Yes, sir. And should I turn on compositing? No, because I guess you can't even see what's happening. Okay, so we have that. Dare I crank the depth of field further? No, at that point it's absurd. Okay, so let's see what this render looks like. So we have this before, and let's see what this does. You ever mess around with Houdini? No. No. I'm just waiting for Blender to catch up. I mean, in theory, it has caught up. I think. Like, it has everything you need to make complicated things, like the simulation zone, the repeat zone, the for each zone. It's just that somebody has to build the stuff. So, like, for example, I built a cloth solver. Isn't fully extensive, but I think that's an example. Okay, what do we got? Before, after. It's not a debate, folks. It's not even a debate. Okay, so we got that. Multiplied it by the ambient occlusion, which might be a little rough. Alpha over is not necessary. Black and white. Darken the thing. glare, vignette. What happens if I don't make it black and white? So color, no color. I might have to put it up to a vote. What do people think? Make it bigger. No color, color. I just think the no color looks so elegant. Oh, interesting. Somebody, so you know that map I made? This map? Somebody recommended, I probably won't like actually keep this, but just as an idea, I mix this black and white with not black and white, dependent on this factor. That way there's only color on some of the signs, okay. Multiply that by a big number. That's kind of an interesting idea. And then if I was to do that, ooh. Why not both? Ooh. Like what if like the reflection had color but the other thing doesn't? Like subtle. That might be it. Who came up with that? Was it Mayro? It was Jane. Okay, full credit. That was a good idea. And then I just want to see what happens if I make it ground only. I'm not saying that's what I will do. It just means I'm thinking about it. Just clear it. Clear it. Okay. Crypto mat. Only the ground. So now I've isolated the ground. And then I multiply it by this. Okay. What does that look like? Por qué? Ah. This is why. Nah, definitely on the crown. But the idea is cool. Okay. So what do we got? We don't need that anymore. What happened? We don't need that. What if I feed this into the black and white? Before, after, before, after, before. Okay. We have that. Noise. And then this might destroy it, but I just want to see. What if I do it before everything? But softly. Nope, that ain't it. Okay, last thing I would consider is I brought out this position pass. Normally what I consider is I take a noise texture and I apply it to the position pass. So now you have like a three-dimensional noise, okay? I take it, I make it rough and detailed, and then usually what I do is I just do a slight darkening in some areas, almost like there's dirt. Like, it just adds detail. I don't know if I'm like invested in it. No, I don't think this one needs it. And also I would need to have the coordinates stick on if I rotate it ultimately. And then what if I take this, which only has some color, and I and I somewhat saturate it. Let's see. Before, after. It's a little much, but just a little. Tasteful. And then last thing I'm interested in is what happens if I blur this black and white map by like 20. Don't know why I can't see a difference. Wow. So just for reference, this was our image. Okay? This is our image post-compositing. It's pretty good. The last thing is I almost feel like the direction's a little wrong. Yeah. But then I don't want the red diamonds to stick out so much. That's an easy fix. I can crypto matte. I think I already have them selected. Invert. Connect. Here. Nope, that is the wrong diamond. Okay. So I want this one right here. Keep your eyes on the ball. Okay. Invert. Did that do anything? Okay. Yeah, that made the red a little less intense. There must be like a reset. Okay. Before, after, before, after. Maybe it's just... Like, I know that's not it. But it could be the beginning of it. Okay, so this is what we had before. Definitely not that way. So far, the gold is by far the best. I don't know. Some of these are really striking. Like, I'm starting to actually prefer it over gold the longer I look at it. I definitely like reddish purple. I don't know. It kind of makes this look boring. But that's more Bejeweled, like it's gold. So what if I do a tiny push? So we're at 0.5, what about 0.55? No. What about 0.45? Closer. So what about 0.48? What about 0.49? Okay, yeah, I like that. That's a push in the correct direction. So this is 0.49. What happens if I change this one? Yeah, maybe just these tiny little sparklies, which I would literally just add. This way I can control them separately. Okay, let's see. Before, after, yes, but less. Yeah. But now my question is, how much does that flicker as it renders? Which I guess we can find out. So I'm going to render, let's say 10 frames. Let's say 20 frames. Those are going to be really low sample renders just to get a sense for it. And then the animation is just this rotating, which shouldn't break anything minus the backdrop. So I'm going to transform this here. Over time. Okay. Let's see if I can render out that animation in real time. Well, real time, I mean during the live stream. How long is a frame? Okay, I think that's enough to be able to see. So I'm going to go for 48 samples and we'll render 20 frames. So I'm going to be choppy, I assume. I don't know if my voice is choppy, but the video will be choppy. And I just need enough that I can see the variation. Because if the sparkles are like super distracting, then that would be an issue. Meanwhile, while we wait, let's surf my Twitter. That's pretty cool. I knew it. I knew everybody was doing Lord of the Rings. I knew it. I knew it. By the way, should I tell you? I'll tell you. I'm working on a secret project. Secret, secret. Let me see if I can find it. It's so secret, it doesn't even open. I do not have the file. Well, this is almost done, but while I do that, I want to show you a little something. Or actually, do I have this saved somewhere? So today is the 7th. Precious, precious. This one. He's cooking. CG Matters cooking. Will be available to everybody soon. But there's a lot to figure out. A lot to figure out. But compared to the source video, pretty accurate. That was the source video, by the way. Okay. We are ready. How flickery is it? View animation. No, that's not too flickery. So what I'm looking at, by the way, is you see these stars down here. I was trying to see, do they go pop, 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 pop? They don't. And this is with like a noisy ass render. So I think we're good. I think tiny modifications before I sign off here and kind of like finish on my own is what? Do I want this shinier? What was the issue that I saw? It was almost like too smooth, too reflective. What if I bump this up a little? Just a little. Even less. Yeah. Okay. Last thing I'm going to do before signing off is I'm going to make one more gem because there is nothing stopping us, right? So what happened here? I thought it was clean. Added the backdrop. Oh. Oh. I see. Okay. So I'm going to make one more gem variant. This one is we have 4, 6. Let's do a round one. So let's do like 24 or like 18. You wouldn't be able to tell. It can have the same material. That's fine. So now there are 3 instances. And yeah, I don't need to. Okay. If I do that, now I have to go modulo 3. So choose a 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. And I think that is good. And remember, I never brought up the number of particles like I said I would. Just cram some more in there. And bake. So now we should have some circular ones too. Never mind the color. But just a bit more variety. And there's a lot of intersections. So just a smidge tinier. So hopefully this prevents some intersection. Definitely better. And let's do one more render with the updated settings. Thank you, Lubica. Okay. Okay. The only thing that's bothering me is these colors are gross. Okay, I do want to fix that. How long are we? 3 hours? That seems to be roughly the status quo nowadays. Okay, so I'm going to look at Gem 2, which is this gross-ass color. Make it closer to purple, and also less saturated. The other one, I'm going to make just less saturated as well. Maybe a little darker. Okay, so let's compare. This was before. I'm going to re-render. So all I'm about to change is the colors, which I know are going to become black and white, but let's see. No, it should be closer to yellow. But not as yellow as it was. Maybe more like an orange. Okay, so before, after. That, I think I can get down with. Okay. Okay. I think this project's ready. So let me just clear anything that isn't doing it. So Nodevember, day 7, Bejeweled, but spelled correctly. Bejeweled? What am I saying? I can't even I can't even spell it correctly. Let's see. Bejeweled. Bejeweled. Okay, so that's all in there nicely. And final organization. So this is our gems. So this is our avoidance, if you remember, so that it doesn't like create gems on certain detailed areas. This is our 3 gems that I'm going to keep kind of exposed, not collapsed, but just, well, collapsed, but not hidden. And I join those together. We pick instance modulo 3 with a random scale and rotation. That's vaguely based off the normal. I'm glad we didn't add the positions of those gems manually like I was planning to. That seems like actual torture. Okay, so this gets a gold material, set shade smooth. Here. Okay, join. Snap to ground, bake, move it all upward, or sorry, rotate all of this. So this is our turntable with a backdrop. Okay, so this can be considered our scene because it's rotating and stuff like that. So maybe this can be a parameter. So negative means it spins clockwise or counterclockwise, something. So I'm going to call this scene setup like that. All of this is going to be our gems, which are dependent on the crown and the proximity thing. So I'll call this surface and like the thing to avoid, and it outputs the gems. Okay, set material, shade smooth. This could have been done pre-bake, just hiding away anything that you would like never ever change. So that means I need a rebake. Luckily, it doesn't take too long, which also means we could go a little harder on the SDF. Let's do that. So I am going to bake. That should take longer. And then I'm going to throw another bake in here. That should be on disk. No, no, no. Do not bake packed. Disk. 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 And join them together. And then snap to ground. This no longer needs to be baked. Well, nah, that doesn't need to be baked. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to move snap to ground inside of here. Okay, so what does that leave us with? So this is all the crown modeling. So just as a reminder of where we came from, we started off with a grid, we bent it, we added ridges, we solidified it, we added lines. At the same time, we made some arches that I combined together with some details. I put them in a row. I wrapped them in a circle. I remeshed and made some shapes. I created some gems. I joined them all together, and then I set up the scene. Like, it's kind of stupid simple when you take a step back, but each step, you know, takes its time. And I guess very interestingly, we could have totally, if I'm correct, you know, just made a different variant. And it's not too late if I wanted to. Okay. That goes there. Then we remesh, add waves, and bake. At the same time, we make the gems and connect that. Oh, we don't need that. Connect that there. There we go. Nice and legible and clean. Okay, so that is that. What else do I need to do? I need to clean up the file. Incredible. Unpack linked. Restore all packed link data blocks to their original locations. Pack all used external files into this blend. What happens if I do that? No new files have been baked. Okay, that's fine with me. I do want to remind everybody that you could get nodes, my nodes at cgmatter.com. So here are all the nodes. Now you can see them nicely. There are 50 of them at the moment. Some of them I use a lot, some of them I use rarely. But all of them have been useful at some point for a project. And I need to figure out why there's 2 of these. But you can get that over at cgmatter.com. So literally type in cgmatter.com, go to free nodes. It will give you an add-on that will let you download, and anytime I update, or every week or month or so, you can click update, and if there is something new, it will auto-populate that. Additionally, if you go to the member site, that's $5. Okay? You get everything Nodevember, including the file that I'll upload later today or tomorrow for day 8. You get every CG Matter and default cube tutorial, like file and write-up. So every single one. What is melting simulation? Let's wait for that one to load. This one's a bit of a heavy web page. So sometimes I write it real custom. And of course, you get 5 years of project files. That's like 400 blend files. And I wrote down some highlights that I liked. So all of that, again, can be found at cgmatter.com. And before I wrap up, let me check something. Okay, so during this live stream, we have 2 new members. Without going specific, thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Mark. If you're here, I assume there's one Gwen. There might be 2 Marks. Actually, now that Markham3D, that's a Mark. Hello. Okay. So thank you everybody for watching. I'm gonna clean up this file and get it ready for processing. Let's just do one final render to see where we're at a low sample count. We got our project and then the compositing. Wait for it. Wait for it. Boom. That's what's up. We won. Bejeweled. So there you go. My request is go to the link in the description, cgmatter.com. I'm going to live stream potentially again today because I want to stay ahead, and I don't expect to live stream on the weekend. Maybe I will, but I want to finish this Nodevember. So no promises. Thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to leave a link in the description, and if you watch the live streams, you know what's coming. I always answer one question and one question only at the end of these streams, okay? So everybody can put down a question, and if yours is unique, if it is good, if it goes beyond a yes or no answer, you will be picked. And yesterday's question went too deep. It was something like, how far away are you from your dream life? Are you in your dream life? So I'm going to wait like 30 seconds since I'm ahead in the future. And we'll answer the question, and then we'll wrap up. Let's have this open as it populates. What do we got? We have, is Keen Tools add-on the best option for face tracking in Blender? How much can you bench? What topics are you fascinated by but haven't figured out? How many hours are you starting? I'm going to wait a few more seconds and then choose my favorite. And there's only one I never answer to. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, so of these, I'm going to answer what topic are you fascinated by but haven't quite figured out? What topic are you fascinated by but haven't quite figured out? A topic I'm fascinated by is I would like to make a proper, when I say fluid simulator, what I mean is smoke and fire. I want to make a proper smoke and fire simulator, which involves using the new grid nodes in 5.0. But other than literally copy pasting like a Euler fluid thing, which there's many tutorials on YouTube, I don't really know how to do that, because what I want to do is, in the same way I made a cloth solver, I also want to make a smoke and fire solver. And I already know how to do embers. That part's easy. And we kind of got vaguely close. We got vaguely close. Yikes. I got vaguely close on day 2, I believe. Let's see. So this isn't just like an arbitrary marshmallow roast. If you were there for this one, it actually has heat advecting upwards, and it's using that for how much it burns. So like I feel like it's there. Like all I would really do is I would make a smoke thing, and how dense it is, how visible it is dependent on that heat or something. I mean, this looks pretty fucking good, to be honest. So that's the answer. That's something I would like to actually figure out. So thank you everybody for watching, and subscribe if you haven't, and go to the website, link in the description. Let me link that, and then I will wrap up. www.cgmatter.com. Thank you everybody for watching.